my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. The reason I'm doing my July wrap-up a couple days early is because I'm not going to be in town all week next week, and I just wanted to go ahead and get this video up. So in the month of July, as of right now, I have read 14 books. That is honestly the most books that I have read in a month since I've been keeping track of monthly TBR, so on and so forth. And I also want to go through what I'm currently reading because I might finish those books before the end of the month as well. I'm sorry, my cat is playing in the boxes. Come here. This is my big ginger cat. He's Tyler. He's a menace. And then I have my black and white kitty over on my chair sleeping. Okay. All right, so as for what I read in the month of July, I have my notes right here. I read 4 YA fantasies, 2 YA sci-fis, 1 classic, 3 nonfiction, 1 adult fantasy, 3 adult sci-fi, and then I read 1 short story, which I didn't include in the total 14. As for my star ratings, I had 1 1-star / DNF, and the reason that I feel comfortable rating that book is because I read like 60-something% of it before I chose to DNF, which I feel like is a good enough amount to form a solid opinion about it. I had 2 2.5-star books, 1 3-star book, 1 3.5-star book, 8 4-star books, and 1 5-star book. So all in all, I feel like it was a really solid reading month, and I liked most of the things that I read. So my 1-star / DNF read for the month was Autonomous by Annalee Newitz. This is an adult science fiction book, and it follows our main character, Jack. And Jack is described, according to the synopsis, as a Robin Hood-like type character. She is kind of battling these pharmaceutical companies who are not distributing drugs to people who need them, so she creates her own drugs and distributes them to these needy people. Well, one of these drugs ends up having really bad adverse effects on people, and she starts having to investigate why these drugs are doing things to these people. So that sounded really interesting to me, but that's not really what the book was about. It was one of those instances where I felt like the synopsis said one thing, but the book was about something completely different. This book also follows a character named Elias and his robot companion / guard almost named Paladin, and they are hunting Jack to basically arrest her for distributing illegal drugs. So the things that I did like about this book is I thought the world building was very well done. It takes place in the year 2144, and everything about this world that this author created was very immersive and very realistic and believable, especially the technology and the way that the countries were set up. For example, we have like the Northern Federation and the Asian Union. So she created this world that was very believable. But that's really the only thing I liked about this book. I found the prose to be incredibly dry, which for sci-fi I don't really mind, but it just wasn't, she was just telling me things all the time rather than showing me. Additionally, I didn't really know much about our main character, Jack. I knew that she created pharmaceutical drugs and was trying to help people, but other than that, I knew nothing about her. Additionally, I did have some problematic things with this book. For example, and this happens in like the first chapter, so I'm not going to spoil anything. Jax makes her drugs on a submarine, and someone breaks into her submarine, and he comes with his slave, which is a person, like a personal slave, not a robot slave. And she ends up taking this slave as her own, but not really a slave. But there's this scene right in the beginning of the book where he initiates like a sexual encounter with him because he's a slave and that's what he's been trained to do, and she takes him up on the offer. But I had a big problem with that because obviously he has lived in a world where he's been brainwashed that that's what he has to do, and she kind of exploits that about him, so it really didn't sit well with me. Additionally, I found that our other character, Elias, and his robot Paladin had this really, really weird sexual relationship that was way too explained and was a huge part of the plot line about how this robot is trying to figure out what his sexuality is and what his gender is. He's a robot. And I thought that this book was going to be a sci-fi book. Instead, it was a book about that. So when I say that this book was pitched as one thing, it was actually something different. That's what this book was about. This robot trying to figure out if he's a male or female. So I feel like if I wanted to read a book about that, I would have picked up a book about that. But don't say one thing and then give me something else. So all in all, I just didn't mesh with this book or the writing style, so I gave it 1 star. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Nexus by Ramez Nam. This is another adult science fiction book that takes place in the near future, and in this near future, man has created a drug where we can called Nexus, that we can telepathically link to other people who have taken this drug. And our main character named Cade, he has figured out a way to kind of computerize it so that you can control Nexus once it's in your body. So I thought that this was a really interesting concept. I've never read a book where telepathy was explained in such a scientific and realistic manner. So I thought that the author did a really awesome job with that. I also thought that the author really tackled like the ethical dilemma of scientists being responsible for what they create and how that could affect mankind. And they talk a lot about transhumans. If you incorporate computerized parts into a human, does that change the fact that they're human? So there was just a lot of ethical issues that were discussed in this book that I think will be very relevant in the near future when we have this type of technology. So the reason that I gave it 2.5 stars, there were some things I didn't like about it. First off, I thought that our 2 main characters, Cade and Sam, were just very flat, very one-dimensional. I was also kind of confused about some things that happened towards the middle of the book. So Nexus is pitched almost to be kind of like a psychedelic drug, and you have that, but then the author tries to combine it with Buddhism or something like Buddhism, where the characters are taking this drug to reach enlightenment or nirvana. And it was just a very bizarre concept to me, and it just got a little weird for me personally as a reader. I didn't really understand what the author was trying to do. Sorry, my cat just completely like knocked down my camera. Anyway, so I don't even know what I was saying. But like I said, I gave this 2.5 stars. I thought it was an interesting read. I really liked the science behind it. Kind of lost me in the middle when Cade and Sam, the other character, were at this house and taking this drug along with other drugs, and it just kind of lost me, and I didn't really know where the author was going with it. So I ended up not liking this as much as I could have. I went ahead and changed the angle of where I'm filming because the light from the window was like reflecting off of me and it was just really, really bright and distracting. So sorry. All right, let's get back into it. So the next 2.5 star book I read was The Eye of Minds by James Dashner. This is the first book in the Mortality Doctrine series, which is a YA sci-fi series. So I read The Maze Runner by James Dashner several years ago, and I remember really, really liking it. Almost it seemed like this book wasn't even written by the same author because I really did not like it that much. This book follows our main character, Michael, and it takes place in a futuristic world where virtual reality is a real thing, and you can go into these virtual reality worlds and have these experiences, and there is this guy who's going around and killing people in this virtual reality world. Somehow Michael gets caught up in that. So first off, I want to say that the writing style in this book was so utterly simplistic that I went online and I searched up what the reading level for this book was, and it's a 5th grade reading level. So I'm not saying that lower reading level books aren't good. I personally just don't like reading them for my enjoyment. I find them way too simplistic. I don't read elementary grade chapter books. And this was pitched as being a YA for like teenagers. And our main character, Michael, was 16, but he acted like and talked like he was a 5th grader, 11 or 12 years old. So I just thought there was a big disconnect in that regard. Secondly, I was expecting there to be more technology, more information about how Michael was able to use his coding and hacking skills in this game world, and the extent we got of that was Michael read the code. Like, there was just nothing along those lines. I also found the characters, our main character and our two side characters, just to be incredibly flat. There was no depth to them whatsoever. Its only saving grace was that it was entertaining. There were some scenes where Michael and his friends had to go through these tasks, and it reminded me of a video game playing out in my head. And then there was a twist at the end that I kind of predicted, but it does make for a more interesting story. So I do want to read the next book because I think it'll be better based on how this book ended. So 2.5 stars. My 3-star read is going to be The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. This is a YA fantasy that follows a brother and sister, Ben and Hazel, who live in a town that borders on fairyland. Now, in the forest where Ben and Hazel live, there is a fae boy, who is in a glass coffin, and they don't know how long he's been there, and the whole town knows about him. And then one day, he wakes up from being in the glass coffin, and Hazel and Ben find out about it, and then the story kind of goes from there. So this book, give you the pros first, was a very quick read. It was very entertaining. I think that it is very hard to pull off a standalone fantasy because you really need a lot of page time to develop a world and develop the characters, and this was just too short to do that in a comprehensive manner. Additionally, I found that while the main characters were good, I liked them, I just found that their arcs were a little bit too immature for me personally. I think that as a teenager, I probably would have enjoyed this book a lot more and been able to relate to Hazel more, but I'm just not in high school anymore, and it just read very young to me. My 3.5-star read was The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James. This is a YA sci-fi, and it follows our main character, Rami, who was born in space. Her parents and several other astronauts were on a mission to Earth 2 to colonize this new planet, and her mom ended up getting pregnant and having Rami in space. So Rami has never been on any terrestrial planet at all. And on the course of their mission, everybody on the ship died, so Rami is by herself. So in order to help her, NASA decides to send another ship with another astronaut to intercept her ship, so she has someone with her to go to Earth too, but it turns out that the person that they are sending might have different intentions for when he intercepts her ship. So this book is kind of like a thriller. I don't read thrillers, so I don't really know how to compare it, but it is, I would say, a young adult sci-fi thriller because it does have a reveal at the end and a twist at the end, and there are some suspenseful moments. This book is incredibly short. It's, I think, 300 pages. It is such a quick read, and while the story isn't that well fleshed out, in the short amount of time that she used to write this, like, it is so addicting. Once you start reading it, you will keep reading till the end. I really, really enjoyed it. I would recommend it if you enjoy sci-fi. I look forward to reading more by Lauren James in the future. All right, we're at the home stretch. We're going to go through all of my 8 4-star reads. So I'm going to start with my nonfiction first. So the first book is going to be A Planet of Viruses by Carl Zimmer. This is a book that I checked out from the library. Super, super short. It's about 100 pages. All it is going through different viruses that have affected mankind over time, such as malaria, HIV, the common cold, and it goes through the origins and how it's been how we tried to treat it over the years and how it affects the body. It was a very short book. I learned a lot. I thought it was interesting, so I gave it 4 stars. My next 4-star nonfiction read was The Darknet by Jamie Bartlett. This is another book that I got from the library. This book basically follows the evolution of the internet and how it has impacted society. And it focuses on several different move the book over here. Focuses on several different things, such as the history and evolution of trolling, of the drug market on the dark web. There were definitely some content in here that was a little bit hard to read. You know, we are dealing with the dark web, but I thought it was really interesting, and the author definitely delves into some ethical dilemmas about technology and how people can use it for bad or good, such as human nature. So I felt that overall it was a good overview book into the history and development of the internet and what people use it for and what it's capable for. I thought it was a good overview book. I'm not a techie person. It was a good introduction for me, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. My next 4-star read is going to be A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This is the second book in the Darker Shade of Magic series, which is an adult fantasy series. So in this world, we have several parallel Londons. We have White London, Red London, Grey London, and Black London. And we have our main character, Kel, who is an Antari. He's a blood mage, and he's the only one that can travel between these parallel worlds. There's not a lot I can say about this book because it is a sequel, but I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. We got to spend more time with the prince, is it Reese? Anyway, the prince and Kel's relationship, so we got to see more about that. We spent a lot more time with Delilah, which, to be completely honest, I'm not a fan of her. Like, I'm really not. And because I don't like her, I do not like the relationship between her and Kel. The reason I don't like Delilah is because of what she did to get into the competition. There's a competition in this book. Like, you literally just ruin some guy's life to enter into a competition so that you could feel better about yourself and that you're learning magic. Like, I think that she does everything because she's headstrong, but her headstrongness comes from being selfish at her core. And because of that, I don't like her, and I don't like the relationship with Kel. We were introduced to a new character, Alucard, that I really liked, and I'm excited to read more about him in book 3, and I'm just excited to see how this series wraps up. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is a adult sci-fi, and it follows two main characters. It follows Barry, and it follows Helena, and I want to say that they have these professions, but if you read the book, they don't really, so you'll kind of know what I mean. But all in all, this is a book about time traveling, which I did not know, because I am not a fan of the whole time traveling idea. I just find it very unfeasible, so I did not know that's what this book was about, but I actually ended up really enjoying it. So in this world, Helena has created a way to travel back into certain memories and create these new reality timelines that all converge at a certain point. And Barry is a detective who is investigating these people who say that they are having these false memories where they wake up one day and they claim that they lived this entirely different life and they don't know what's real and what's not. So I thought the book was very interesting. It's very fast-paced. It's actually really easy to get through. There was a ton of science thrown in there to explain the process of time travel and how that relates to memories and this false memory syndrome. It's like nothing I've ever read before, so I found it really interesting, and it's one of those books where you just want to find out what happens and you won't put it down, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. My next 4-star read is going to be The Winner's Crime by Marie Rukowski, I think. Yes. This is a YA. I call it fantasy, but there's no magic in it and just takes place in this world that doesn't exist in our world. Fake countries, fake lands, fake emperors, that kind of thing, but there's no magic. So I don't like using the word fantasy, but this is the second book. I was so surprised. Like, the author developed these characters. They became so much more complex. Both of these characters, our main character, Kestrel and Aaron, they were just dealing with these massive internal conflicts that were guiding their actions and just creating this angst that was amazing. I should probably tell you what this series is about. So this series follows Kestrel, who is a Valorian woman, the daughter of a general, and the Valorians several years ago invaded and conquered this land called Huron, and they enslaved all the Huranis. And one day Kestrel is at a market and she comes across a slave auction, and she buys this Hurani slave named Aaron. So I don't want to tell you more about that because I'll be giving away what happened in the first book, but like I said, these characters were so much better developed in this book, and their relationship to each other and Kestrel's relationship with the Valorian Emperor's son and the relationship with her father. It was so well done, and I'm so excited to read the final book in the series to see what happens, because this sequel ended on a massive cliffhanger. My next 4-star read, yes, I am back in the Cassandra Clare universe. I never thought I would be, but I am. I finally finished The Mortal Instruments. This is City of Heavenly Fire, which is a YA paranormal fantasy series. It's very popular, and I thought this was a really good conclusion to the series. I had a lot of fun reading the series. I had a lot of fun seeing how these characters developed and seeing what they went through and how everything came together at the end. I'm really glad that I read this because the next 4-star book that I have is Lady Midnight, also by Cassandra Clare. So I wanted to finish The Mortal Instruments because I know that it's recommended you read City of Heavenly Fire before you start The Dark Artifices, and now I completely understand why, because in the City of Heavenly Fire we are introduced to the characters in The Dark Artifices, which builds up to them when they are older in the series, so we understand all the backstory. So I really enjoyed Lady Midnight. I thought that this book was a bit darker than her other Shadowhunter series. So in this series we're following Emma and Julian, who are two Shadowhunters. They are also parabatai, which means they are bonded to always protect each other and fight with each other, so on and so forth. And Emma's parents were killed when she was 12 years old, and the Shadowhunter Council kind of brushed it off as just an erroneous murder, part of Sebastian's plan, and Emma always knew that it wasn't, so she starts investigating when she's older. So I thought that this book was definitely a bit darker than her other books because it dealt with a serial murderer. So I really liked that, and it dealt with a cult, which I thought was kind of creepy. I also really like Julian. I think he is an awesome character. I absolutely love how he's a father figure to his younger siblings, and I absolutely love the dynamic between all of the family members. I think it's really healthy. They're very supportive. I just love each and every one of these characters in this book of the Blackthorn family. The reason that I wasn't able to give it 5 stars is because while I love Julian, I really don't know that much about Emma. I feel like doesn't really have an identity of her own. There's really nothing about her that stands out to me. She's just kind of there, and I feel like you could replace her with any other character and the story would still go on. I don't think she's as developed as Julian, just in my personal opinion. So because of that, the romance, which is such a big part of the plot, I'm not really as invested in. But it was still a very fun read, definitely a dense read. I want to continue with the series. So 4 out of 5 stars. And my last 4-star read for the month is going to be The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This is a pretty short book. It's only about 100 pages, but it follows a scientist who's figured out a way to time travel, and he has created a time traveling machine, and he goes 800,000 years into the future to see what's going on in our current society, and he comes across a society where there's 2 different races per se, like a gentle kind of childlike race, and then there is a underground kind of laborious race, and he just kind of goes from there trying to figure out how humanity went from where it was, and I think this was written in 1895 to in the year 800,000 whatever. So I actually really like this book. I read it in one sitting. I thought that the science, even though it was written 150 years ago or so, was really, really interesting. I also liked how H.G. Wells took things from took issues from his society at the time and built it into the society that we read about here. So he talks a lot about like industrialists at the time versus the gentry at the time, and kind of shows how their evolution turned into these people that we meet in this book. So I thought it was an interesting concept. I don't know how relevant it is today, but I still thought it was interesting. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. All right, guys, thanks for sticking with me. So my 5-star read for the month is going to be a nonfiction book, and that is Finding Jesus in the Old Testament by David Limbaugh. So I have read Jesus on Trial by David Limbaugh, and I actually really like him as an author because the book that he writes are so well researched. On the flip side, his writing is very dry, and it is very kind of almost textbooky. But I wanted to read this book to learn a lot, and I definitely did. So this book goes through the whole Old Testament, all the books of the Old Testament, and he goes through and he teaches us about the different prophecies of the Old Testament and we learn about not only that, but the covenants that God made with Israel, with David, with Abraham. We learn a lot about the Jewish, I guess, history in that regard and how it relates to Jesus' life on earth and his death on the cross and what that means for us today. And I thought it was a really, really interesting novel. I personally find the Old Testament to be extremely daunting, and this book really did break it down, and I really liked that part of it. I also learned a lot about the history of that region of the world, which I'm trying to increase my knowledge of anyway. So this book delivered on all the things that I was looking to learn from it, which is why I gave it 5 stars. Not only that, but the last 100 pages are all notes and not recommendations, but other books that he used to research this. So if I want to continue reading on this subject, I have so many more resources that I can go to. So I definitely recommend this if you are looking to increase your knowledge of the Old Testament and to learn more about the major and minor prophets of the Old Testament, and as a way to see how the prophecies in the Old Testament were fulfilled in the New Testament and what is to come. It was definitely a very interesting read, so I gave it 5 stars. Alright guys, so I just wanted to touch base about what I'm currently reading, because I may or may not finish both or one of these books, I don't know, before the end of July. So the first one is Black Heart by Holly Black. This is the 3rd and final book in the Curse Worker series. So I'm definitely going to finish this because I have less than 100 pages. So I'm going to try and finish this one tonight. And then the other book I'm currently reading is Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. So I am currently on page 189 of Lord of Shadows. So this one I will probably take with me when I go on vacation next week, but I'm definitely going to try and finish Black Heart today, and I will include these both in my August wrap-up. Okay guys, that is all I have for you. Thank you for sticking with me for such a long video. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them or what you read in the month of July, and I will see you soon. Bye.